guys, welcome back to another episode of Grave Reviews. My name is Chris and today I'm talking about the new sci-fi horror movie, After the Pandemic. That's right, a little movie about a pandemic. What a interesting and unique topic that hasn't been explored recently in film or real life. But what a better time to cash in on real human suffering than now. And that's what we're doing here with After the Pandemic. Not really. I mean, a little bit, right? Like, the movie is about a pandemic that wipes out most of the population except for younger children who have an immunity to it. It has the visuals of wearing a mask and all that stuff that we're all too familiar with nowadays. And so it does feel kind of crappy. There is a lot of suffering that has happened because of the real life pandemic. And then to kind of tie in a movie with that, feels a little shitty. I mean, it's not the first movie to do it, and it won't be the last. And I'm okay with it if it brought something unique and interesting to the idea, and sort of does, like I said, with these kids being immune to the virus. But let's unpack this a little bit. So this movie, After the Pandemic, is directed and written by Richard Lowry, who has 23 director credits. Now, I get it, these are low-budget movies, but there's a lot of amateur production mistakes littered throughout this thing, and we're going to unpack this thing. So you just sit back, and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip that started on this. I feel like I went to Gilligan's Island there. So, like I was saying, After the Pandemic follows this young girl who's immune. Her entire family's dead. She wanders around the apocalypse, dancing and surviving, eating cat food, while these adults, it looks like adults, show up in white jumpsuits, hazmat suits with guns, and try and, I guess, capture these people to maybe learn how they're immune or something. I don't know. But she runs from them and then stumbles into another survivor, a young girl who's very hardened, and these two grow a relationship, and then some, I guess, hijinks ensue. So, yeah, not a big fan of this one. Not a big fan at all, I will say that. Now, granted, it is very low budget. It seems like they are hobbling this thing together with no money. So there is some stuff I will give them credit for. There's a decent amount of different locations. The movie feels like it's moving from time to time. They do their best to try and capture a remote feeling, even then when they're in cities and stuff, which isn't easy to do. And there is some interesting zombie-like effects that look like they're done in post as opposed to practical, but it does give a unique look, and it was kind of interesting. They don't do enough with it, but when it's on the screen, I was like, I've never really seen something that looks quite like that before, so I'll give them that. Everything else, not so great. Not so great, guys. So I was talking about production issues. There's a lot of issues here. Just like avoidable things too. Like, they do slow motion a bunch of times in this movie, but they didn't shoot it in a higher frame rate, and so it just looks like it's cutting frames. Like, they shot it in 24 frames per second, and then they slowed it down, so it just looks choppy as opposed to a smooth slow motion. And that's easily avoidable by just adjusting the frame rate. You could say, well, maybe they're using a DSLR that only shoots in 4K at 24 and 1080. Who cares? Fucking shoot it in 1080 and then boost it up 200% or something to get to the 4K. I guarantee that is way less jarring than the frames being cut. It feels like a lot of the dialogue is ADR'd, and I think it's mostly outside, but it makes the performances feel inauthentic and wooden, although it doesn't really matter because I think the performances in this movie are very bad. Everybody's mumbling, everybody's quiet, there's no emotion to anything. The main actress always has this look of worry on her face, but she's kind of like a wet rag. Wet rag? What does that mean? Wet? What's the phrase I'm looking for? Sandwich? No, that's not it either. Wet? I don't know why she's not wet, but she's just monotone and dull in her performance, and the other girl has an edgier look, and the way she performs is a little bit more interesting, but still very wooden very emotionless a lot of times is how it feels like. And that's a problem because this movie is all about these two characters and their relationship and their dynamic. And so the emotion, the drama needs to work, and it doesn't. We have a bunch of out of focus shots. We have a bunch of overexposed shots. Stuff like that starts to eat away at the production quality. We're told at the opening that it's been 5 years since like just about everyone died. However, lawns still look mowed. It doesn't feel like an apocalypse. There's pools. I don't know, these filters are still going. These pools are immaculate. They've been going for 5 years without any care, and there's no algae or anything. It just doesn't feel like an apocalypse. Cars continue to drive. Food is still good. A bunch of little nitpicky things you can do with the story and with the world that they're trying to set up. You have some grainy, low-lit footage. You have sound that's not great. A lot of bad sound effect work that doesn't fit in the mix. It comes off as cheap and amateur. And then you have this synth score that is constantly fading in with a in every scene, and you're like, oh no, not again, for the love of Christ, not again. Weird color grading. Just a lot of low-budget stuff, okay? And if I looked up this guy's credits and I saw that this was his first movie, I would cut him a lot more slack. But this is his 23rd movie, and it's like, if you don't see these issues, I don't know how you're going to improve upon them. Some things, there's a lot of things that just happen when you're making a low-budget movie, okay? And you have to just choose your battles. You know, pick your battles, get the best things you can. But a lot of these things are easily avoidable. And so I don't know if it's just because they're rushing to get it done or what, but it keeps knocking the production quality down, makes it feel way more amateur. But there's also moments where there is a decent amount of effort though, so I don't know, I'm torn here. There's moments where there's just like a practical effect for like a second, and it's like, well, they went to the effort to doing that whole thing just for a second of footage, so they must care in some ways. I don't know. So I was never invested in the story. I think the only interesting element of the story is how there's these like hazmat wearing government officials that show up and they're trying to kidnap these children, and would like to dive more into that. And I get like, I can just come to some conclusion that they want to figure out an immunity for the disease themselves, but I feel like there's a lot more you can explore with that element, and it's never touched on, never explained. They're just used as faceless villains who show up and chase our characters around occasionally. We also get like other kids in the world who have become cannibals. They don't look like cannibals. I mean, I don't really know what a cannibal looks like, I guess. So maybe that's what cannibals look like. I did see that band, the Fine Young Cannibals, before, but I'm not exactly sure if they were actually cannibals or it's just a name, or maybe both. So yeah, it's boring. I mean, I guess after the pandemic and everyone's dead, life would be kind of boring. And so this movie captured that pretty well. Not a fan of After the Pandemic. Just a lot of issues, none of it coming together in any particularly interesting way, from production to story to acting. So I would pass on this unless you're really into... I would pass on this. I would give this a rotten score, a 3 out of 10. I'll give it a little bit of credit for some effort in some of its effect work and stuff like that, and probably doing a bit with no money. But for the most part, it's not a very compelling movie, and it's not going to be very interesting for an audience. So that's it for After the Pandemic, guys. If you've seen it, let me know what you think. Let me know what I should be watching. Like, subscribe, and I'll catch you here next time, guys.